moreEUROPE now. More Europe now. More Europe now. Hosted by Nana Walzer with resident expert Dirk van den Boom and special guests. Hi and hello, all of you. Every time I'm so surprised. Oh, yeah, we're online. Yeah. It's so great to have you all here with us. And today, you're not only beautiful, all you dear people out there, you're very brave because you dared to dive with us deep into the abyss of the glooming apocalypse. That's where we go tonight. Tonight is the night for a leisure trip, if I might say so, right up to the end of the world that might be near or not. We will soon find out. So take a deep breath, lean back, get ready for the many ways of how we all together may bring doom and misery upon us. We want to know today whether there's still a chance, not only for survival, but for even well-being and living in peace and prosperity, considering factors like the climate change, the energy crisis, the evils of growth-focused economy with all their effects on our lives. We ask ourselves tonight what to do now and about what to do and how to do it. In any case, I may assure you that we will treat even this topic as burning as it is literally when we consider the incredible heat wave or devastating wildfires this month. We will treat also this topic with the wisdom of a clear mind and a soft smile in the midst of chaos, because those are the ingredients for dealing with things, with incredible things. That's better to deal with them with a clear mind and a soft smile instead of just getting agitated. We won't do that. And who is better equipped with this kind of superhuman features, the clear mind and the soft smile, than our magnificent, marvelous, I dare to say miraculous political scientist, science fiction author, and migration counselor, Professor Dr. Dirk van den Boom. Hello, hello.
Good evening, Nana.
Ah. And you have to endure a little bit more of a speech from my side to complete our framing about the looming doom that is to come upon us. Because I need to say it all before we can start. But then we will start differently than everyone out there expects. So, more than ever, I'm humbly grateful to have you here with us. We will all delicately slide down the road to doom together. We will enjoy the ride because you are so softly and nicely analyzing what is happening to us and keep the spirit up. And while we are all keeping the spirit up, please endure once more the praise to our supporters. More Europe Now is powered by the UEF, the Union of European Federalists. This is a non-partisan NGO, very old actually, that is active in about 30 countries and funded by the EU's Citizens' Equality, Rights and Values Program, which supports projects on the Union values with the aim to foster equality, participation and the prevention of violence. As always, our deep gratitude also goes out to Europe Direct Vienna and BEJ Austria. Stay as you are. So, praising our supporters is done. Back to flattering Dirk. Dirk, tonight you might need all the good vibes that you can get. Dear community out there, I see you write into the chat a lot of things. I would really kindly ask you to help me make Dirk blush and write some nice things about him. He's such a great guy. While I will start our dystopia reality show with the framing that I framed before. And you're, of course, very welcome to write also questions. And of course, like always, comments. I will have an open eye for you. Okay, getting hot right now. We're dipping straight into the inferno of our days. July 2023 seems to be the hottest month in recorded history worldwide. Worldwide. I have to learn that. Worldwide. I like to say worldwide instead of worldwide. Anyway, bringing unbearable heat waves that are of course, caused by climate change, as a recent study of the World Weather Association, this is an international network of scientific institutions, just has confirmed. There was some time where everyone said, well, it could only be the weather, but no, it is connected to the climate change, what we are experiencing. Yet, we all still blow the fossil resources like oil, gas, and coal up into the sky, causing the planet to become a more and more hostile place to live in. Garbage like plastic contaminates not only the oceans, but by now, most probably every living being, causing all kinds of troubles that we even don't know all about yet. And humankind seems somehow to be too blind-eyed to stop the general exploitation and the destruction of nature. So here we are confronted with global warming and thus with unstoppable wildfires and heavy rainfall, devastating storms, awful droughts, all of them destroying the basics of survival, such as food, houses, infrastructures, and for many people, ways to create an income, especially for those in the global south. And of course, well, all of this creates health issues and different other problems. Constant stress on the nature leads to the elimination of whole ecosystems, to the diminishing of biodiversity, and to effects like the creation of deadly viruses, as we all know. And as a result of all these circumstances, our everyday lives are more and more under pressure. Our safety, well-being, and peace becomes more endangered. And the more the financial systems and the economic stability become unpredictable, the more social security or also reliable healthcare, for example, they are somehow in decline, while inflation and living costs, like for heating, rent, or food, are rising. And in the end, all these elements and many more are interconnected. They influence each other. And this is on one side extremely concerning, but on the other hand, it gives us humans a chance to interfere on many, many different ends in the hope to change the track to destiny from a road to hell, perhaps to a road of better prospects. And the crisis of the world is, of course, not only a problem of Europe, so much is true. Nevertheless, the EU tries to tackle as many of the causes for the world's impending doom, be it, for example, via the Green Deal, which aims to reach climate neutrality, that is net zero emissions by 2050, or via the Horizon program, to name just two programs. This program is supporting science and innovation for finding new and creative solutions. We will hear more about what is being done on the European level from our two special guests today, and what we can do, of course, we will discuss as well. So that's enough of the doomful framing for this third episode of More Europe Now. Dirk, here come my simple questions to you this time. What is your assessment? What are the most dangerous reasons to worry these days? What can really cause our planets and with that humanity's doom the most? Go, Dirk.
Well, I don't know if it's dooming the most, but I think one issue which has to be considered is something which is influencing all the other kinds of crises we have and our ability to solve these problems. That is something we talk about sometimes, but not so much these days, and that is poverty and social exclusion. I mean, in the European Union, we have a little bit more than 95 million people who are close to the poverty line, which is a fifth of our population. That's not a small number. And people with small resources or no resources don't have the ability to adjust to other policies, to other ways of life, to a more environmentally friendly behavior, style of living. Because they have some much more immediate problems to solve. And if we forget the social dimension, we can talk about energy, we can talk about climate, and everything we talk about this evening. But if we forget the social dimension of what we are doing, the policies we imply to solve these problems, then we have a big problem, because in then implementing all these issues, we might forget the ability of a fifth of our fellow citizens in the European Union to actually follow these new rules and regulations. And I think that is a very important issue we have to consider all the time. We have to not only the social problems in the south because of climate change, we also have to talk about the social problems we have in the European Union. And these are serious, because for some time now it seems we are losing the war against poverty.
A total different answer than I was thinking you would give. This is incredible. Thank you, Dick, for your first incredible, interesting answers. Here comes my second question. You as a science fiction author, you have an open mind when it comes to creative solutions for seemingly unsolvable problems, which is the plot of every science fiction book, as far as I know. I would love to change the world by crazy ideas. That's such a nice and different approach. So that's why I'd like to present to you 3 real and innovative ideas that could be game changers for the climate crisis. And I would like to ask you for your assessment of their rescue potential, so to say, be it in reality, be it as a science fiction author. So here comes idea number 1. And this is really, I didn't create that in my mind. It's real. It's scientifically proven and developed. If we paint 2% of the Earth with a special white paint, this is extremely white and thus doesn't absorb UV light. It reflects 98% of sunlight and infrared warmth. and it results in a decrease of about 4.5 centigrade. So if we paint 2%, this might stop climate change for good. If we paint buildings and roofs, we bring down the temperature in cities and even could avoid air conditioning, by that saving lots of energies as well. So 2% of the Earth, that would be the size of the US. We paint the whole United States. It's about 9.8 million square kilometers. And yes, they say it would be very difficult to produce as much paint and to have all those materials. But anyway, what do you think about painting the Earth white for the green coals?
Well, it's a wonderful idea, but I see again logistical problems. I would say I don't know if it is enough to paint somewhere on Earth these 2% or in certain areas. I mean, I'm not a scientist. I think that if it has to be equally divided all over the planet, then we have a small international cooperation challenge on our hands. But I think if this is an easy solution and can be done with a minimal effort and has such a great effect, then this is really a task which international cooperation should take on. But with all innovative ideas and this crazy sounding ideas, which might actually prove to be true, we have to take into consideration that convincing the public of these kind of things and therefore urging policymakers to do these kind of things, that will be the biggest challenge of all, because there will be many people, Nana, who are not science fiction authors or wide thinking scientists or politicians. Most of them will laugh at the idea. And this might slow down the development of this like this. So the political communication in this is very, very important.
Thank you so much. I see good questions also in the chat, also about how to spread the white paint over the Earth. I have to say, I can't remember what was written in those articles. So I come to the next question. Transport and mobility, as we all know, are massive factors when it comes to climate change. They cause about 30% of CO2 emissions. That is to say it for everyone, but I'm sure you know it already. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that blocks Earth's warmth to leave towards space. So that's what's happening with those emissions, thus making our Earth warmer, amongst other effects that CO2 also has. Airplanes are heavily contributing to the pollution of the atmosphere. They're not the most polluters, but they are also contributing. So there is this idea out there. Instead of flying with airplanes, humanity could go back to airships, something like Zeppelins, but with solar-driven electric motors instead of using petrol or hydrogen. What do you say, dear Dirk? Is this a good way to fly in the future? It would also at least decelerate the world, because a trip to New York, between London and New York, takes 2 days in the night then.
Well, if we have a nice bed, I don't have a problem. No, I think that this is one of the proposals made, and we right now have already in Norway, the Norwegian airline, which is starting now to implement in short distance flights, planes with electrical engines as well. So we still have some setbacks on the technology, but we are very good in developing better technologies. So I'm quite confident that in 10, 15, 20 years, also electrical engines will be capable of passing longer distances. So, and if it's airships or normal planes, I don't care. I think that this gloom we have that because of climate change, we have to stop air travel is unrealistic. We don't need to be gloomy about that. I think we can still continue to travel through the air, and maybe even a little bit faster than an airship. Also, I would like to have a very slow and calmful trip to Vienna one day in an airship. I would absolutely book that, no problem. And I drop by at your place with a parachute. But so all in all, I think we have technology which can be further developed and refined. And when we are decommissioning all the old jets, I think we will have a replacement if we follow that seriously.
All right, I'm sure we talk about today also about the problems of electrical energy and storing electrical energy and batteries and so on. But before we come to our experts, I have another crazy idea. The third idea, it sounds heavily like science fiction in my ears, and I read it in several different sources, and it still sounds like conspiracy theories, yet it seems to be done already in Russia, in China, and even in Germany. And this is about the injections of clouds with silver iodide to dissolve them, to avoid bad weather, for example, at events of like the Olympic Games opening in China in 2008. Some scientists do not believe that this strategy works or is scientifically to be verified. Others say it might work anyway. Changing the weather sounds tempting. So simply dissolving storms and heavy rains here and let it rain somewhere else on the wildfires, for example. What do you say to that idea?
Oh, I see all those chemtrail conspirators, the theorists jumping up and down and being very happy and telling me, we told you so." So that will be one big challenge, again, in political communication. And to be quite honest, I heard about this as well. And the science behind it seems to be interesting, but it might change the weather, but I don't know it. I don't think it can change the climate. And the problem we have is we need to influence the basic conditions of the climate. So if I have to opt, I would opt for the white paint.
All right, we got a choice of Dirk. Enough with fiction, back to science and to politics and to the question what is being done and what can be done to influence the critical state that our world is in right now. We are ready to welcome our first special guest of tonight, and this is Michael Bloss, and he's a member of the European Parliament since 2019. In the European Parliament, he is a member of the Committee on the Environment, Public Health and Food Safety, as well as a member on the Committee on Industry, Research and Energy. So there's a lot of interesting topics in there in his special fields. He's a climate policy spokesman for the Greens in the European Parliament and was in the center of action when core pieces of the Green Deal were negotiated. For example, in fields such as the European climate law, the European emissions trading, or the new electricity market. Hello and welcome. Great to have you here, Mr. Bloss.
Hello,
Here
nice
you
to be
are.
there in the stream. Hi.
Great. Let's get straight to the point. How is the EU trying to counteract the climate crisis and its many challenges on so many different levels, from ecology over energy up to economy and finances or social security?
Yeah, it is actually doing a lot. Well, it's not trying to paint a lot of white paint on all of the European roofs. Maybe that would be another idea. But basically, it's not so much known, but the EU as such has really a lot of responsibilities for combating the climate crisis. We are, as the European Union, a member of the UN Paris Agreement. So all of the EU member states have to coordinate and they have to speak with one voice. And when they come to all of these Paris Agreement climate conferences that happen every year. And we also, as the EU, we are giving the climate objectives, so our climate goals. They're European climate goals, and then they're broken down to all of the different European member states. And then we have to also implement a lot of laws. For instance, we have something like a CO2 price. So if in industry or in energy, you're emitting CO2, you have to pay a price, and you have to, have some kind of emitting right, and this you have to buy. We have been doing stuff like not allowing petrol or fossil-driven cars to be put new into the market from 2035 onwards. We have been putting out some goals on how much renewable energies there should be in the year 2030. So there's really a lot. And if I may say this one thing, that like we can think about all of these crazy technologies that can save us from the climate apocalypse. But the good thing is, and maybe that gives also some relief, most of these technologies do exist already. We do not have to reinvent something completely new, but for instance, solar energy, wind energy, electric cars, trains, all of these things exist. So we just have to apply it more and stop emitting CO2 from gas, from coal, from oil.
Thank you so much for this first answer. I see in the chat a very interesting question. I would like to surprise you with it because it actually concerns something. There was a study done recently that I think going by train costs 30% more than going by airplane. And from the chat, there comes the question or the idea, maybe the European train companies could get closer together so that we have, a better alternative. Do you have any ideas about those new kinds of mobility when the old-fashioned cars seem to be out of reach anymore, and perhaps electric cars for far distances? That's still not the ideal way.
It's still surely not the ideal, and to have better European train connections is really something that has to be done. I once was in China, actually. I visited my brother, and I went from Hong Kong to Beijing by train overnight, and I think it was 6 hours or so. With the flight, it's 4 hours. So it is possible. You can do train connections that are super fast and that can compete with airplanes. We have to get there, but first in Europe we have to also improve the the national trains, the public transport systems. There's a lot of things to do. But for instance, what is really great, and thanks to Austria, we are now seeing more and more sleeper trains in the whole of Europe. We soon get a train from Berlin to Paris directly. We will have a sleeper train from Berlin to Brussels. We have one from Vienna to Brussels already. So I think there's lots of things to be done here. The point is, we have to invest in this more. Like, we invest so much more in streets and in cars and motorways than in the train infrastructure. So if we at least would even that out, that would be already a great start to put the balance right, to transition toward a climate-friendly future.
Okay, you mentioned some of the general topics that the EU works on in your first statement. I would like to go a little bit more into specifics. Which core elements did you personally negotiate in the European Parliament, and what came out of it? Give us, please, some impression. How does it work? What is difficult to discuss? Where was it easy to get a quick solution? And what is the most remarkable outcome?
Well, I have to say it was really, I mean, the last 4 years that I'm in the parliament, they were really great for climate policies, because we started in 2019 with a huge wave of support. There was this Fridays for Future activists, the whole society wanted to have more climate policies. So that was very great. And what we have been achieving in the last 4 years, I think, is more than has been achieved in the 15 years before. So maybe also to counter a little bit the narrative of we are completely heading to doomsday, things are being done, and politics can change things if rightly done and if supported. So what we did is, first we set out our climate goals. So we said until 2030 we need to reduce our CO2 emissions by 55%. Before it was 40%, so that's 15% more. And then we implemented lots of policies to actually get there. I also negotiated this climate law. There's also other nice things in it. Then how to get there? For instance, I negotiated this ETS, the emission trading system, so the price for CO2 on the European level. Currently it covers around 43% of all emissions, and in the future it will cover around 85% of all emissions. So that's great. So we have a system for all emissions, and basically what we did is we said we define how much CO2 can still be emitted by Europe. So this is a defined sum. Let's say, I don't know, 1 billion tons of CO2, and then this 1 billion tons of CO2, we kind of cut it into small pieces, and these are then the rights, the vouchers to emit CO2, and you can trade this. So this is the emission trading scheme. So for instance, if you have a, I don't know, a coal power plant, or you have a steel plant, for every ton of CO2 that you emit, you need to have this small voucher that costs money, and this is the CO2 price. So currently the CO2 price is around 90 euros. If you think about around 5-6 years ago, it was only at 15 euros. So it already went up 4 times. And so that's good, because if it becomes very expensive to emit CO2, people might say, oh, I will not do this anymore. I will now go for renewable energy. I will now go for green steel making. I will now go for an e-car, all of these kind of things. So this is one of the big chunks. I mean, there's been much more. We have been doing more than 16 laws on all the different topics, from renewable energies to better insulating our houses, to putting e-charging stations on all European streets, to a social climate fund, to ideas how to not develop an electric airplane, but to develop kind of an petrol e-fuel that is created from sun and from wind power, and that airplanes in the future have to use these kind of e-fuels. So really lots of stuff. And just recently, like the next stage is then to build the architecture for the transition to 100% renewable energy. And I've been also working on this architecture, the electricity market design, where it's about how can we fund renewable energies, but also how can we ensure that electricity prices for people stay low.
Thank you so much for that description. You mentioned that Fridays for Futures had an impact. I would like to ask you about the impact of civil society. I saw a question in the chat that was actually addressing the connection of the European Parliament and the democratic education. I would like to postpone this answer for our next episode, because we will talk about democracy and democratic education at that next episode. But I would like to take out the civil society aspect. You experience now a period in the EP, as you said, that is very progressive. It could change after the next elections. We don't know. How big would you say is the impact of the civil society of, be it, I don't know, the last generation activities, very provocative? Is this helping the Green Cause? Or be it Fridays for Future, who seem to be part of kind of establishment by now, if to say so, bringing good ideas and lots of people educating them on what is going on and what to do. How do you see the impact of the civil society when putting the Green Deal into practice?
I think it is really huge, this impact. Civil society in general moves politics. If civil society is able to put a topic at the center of the debate, politicians have to react to this. And they were really able to put the climate crisis into the center of the debate. And then there was a newly elected Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, and she basically had no topic. And then she had no choice but to say, this is the topic that I am connecting my legislation with. So she said the Green Deal will be Europe's Man on the Moon project. So she made it really big. But if not for Fridays for Future, for all of the people in society who went to the streets, who demanded for better climate policies, she would have taken a different topic, I really assume. So it is big. Unfortunately, well, then basically Corona came in, the war against Ukraine, the climate crisis became weaker and weaker, and also there was huge, how do you say, like disappointments in the climate movement. They basically said we do not see politicians to act. We want to have the change faster, and from this disappointment, lots of people say we have to be more radical. We have to go to the streets. We have to, like the last generation, block it. And unfortunately, I don't see it working now so much because, well, especially this very confrontative ways of blocking, for instance, streets, it creates a lot of backlash against climate policies. So maybe we have to think again. So who are the big polluters? Who are those who really profit from emitting CO2? This is the big oil, the big gas, the big coal companies. I mean, they make lots of money. They profit from it. They have every interest that we are not fast in climate policies. Maybe we should target them more than ordinary people that want to go to work or so. And I think that would help to get more people behind climate policies again.
All right, let's come to our question. Last question for today to you. Then we switch to our second guest, and we will answer the really interesting question in the chat with our second guest, because I think he has a lot to say about that. But to you, Mr. Bloss, how do you see actually the disturbance or the difficulties when putting the Green Deal into practice? Are there who is blocking, the green transition? Who is blocking that we can survive on our world? Of course, we know everything has to play together. There has to be, the economy kind of remodeled and to be rethought, and there have to be social securities at the same time. We don't know where the money is coming from. The fiscal stability, we don't know if that will hold, and we have one crisis after the other, as you said. Anyway, where do you see the main difficulties in putting the Green Deal into practice in your daily life as
I
politician?
think, well, first of all, really, we have to always remember that there are, I mean, the profit of the oil companies in the last in 2022 was 4 trillion euro. That's massive amounts of money. That's as big as the German GDP, and it's profit. So that can be spent on counter campaigns, and I think we currently see that. I think what also is a huge problem is that currently in the how to say in our debating culture, the European Parliament is actually a great example of how consensus and compromise making works. We are basically 4 groups in the middle: socialists, conservatives, liberals, the Greens, and we can form a majority, and somehow we have to find a compromise between each other. So what is happening right now is really concerning. It is that we're seeing that there is a split in the middle. So the conservatives go with the far right, and then there's kind of the progressive camp, and they are fighting each other. And it becomes almost like, US style politics, where the right, the conservatives, they are basically now using climate as a way of cultural war. They say, well, if you're for climate, then you are woke and na 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 na, and real conservatives, they don't say it, but they don't care about the climate. They care about the economy, which is absolutely weird, because there is no economy in the climate crisis that is working. So the economy is depending on us fighting the climate crisis. But this polarization, I think this is really killing it right now, and we shouldn't have it. And really, one of the biggest tasks for the next parliament, for the next European episode, is not to wage the cultural war in Europe, but to try to still be the consensus, the compromise-making machine that we have, what we used to be. It's really important, because otherwise, I mean, Europe is so diverse, it's so beautifully diverse, but if we split it, it will not function. We have to find compromises. So these two things, I mean, fossil companies make too much money, and there is this polarization around climate policies, and those two things are currently really slowing down climate policies. And the result is that the whole world is slowing down in its climate policies, and we will not be able to fight this crisis. And we feel currently the radical change that it brings about. I mean, 60,000 people in the last year death in Europe from the heat waves. That's something that we don't want to afford as a society.
Thank you so much for your precise words. And we could ask you forever questions. Anyway, for now, I thank you very much, and wish you a wonderful evening. I hope to have you again as guest, and we can ask you much, much more. And it was great to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and have fun.
All right, and we switch on Twitch now to our second special guest and expert. This is Bernhard Zlanabitnig, and he will be the one who I will ask the question out of the chat if he is joining us. Is he joining us? The big question. It's exciting. I keep on introducing him.
There's no good connection, what I see here.
Okay. Okay. I will introduce him. Could we have an audio of Bernhard if we don't have a video? Let's see if that works. I will introduce him anyway, and we see if we can get a better connection. Bernhard Zlanabitnig. Connection. Okay, I got some words in my ear. So he studied law, humanitarian management, and renewable energy systems, and is the vice president of the European Environmental Bureau. This is Europe's largest environment umbrella organization based in Brussels, and he's also the director of the EU-Umweltbüro in Vienna, Austria. His focus areas are circular economy, renewable energies, biodiversity, and sustainable development. And he really has a lot to say, so I really hope he is coming soon. I will count to 3. If not, I keep on grilling Dirk with impossible questions. That will be the plan. Okay, so Dirk, it's time for you and me. I'd like to talk with you about the energy crisis. And I do not mean that everybody seems to be more tired since the pandemic, which I also see as energy crisis. We know that the war in Ukraine is funded by Russia's oil and gas sales, and Europe was very much dependent on those sources of fossil energy. So a rapid phase out of this dependency was and still is a main demand of the UEF, also of the European Federalists. And the Federalists, they stated already in February this year that as we see almost 50 million households on Europe experience energy poverty, and this is also a topic that you talked about before, they ask for a diversification of energy sources, for redoubling on the efforts in green energy, and for solidarity and unity within the EU. They call for a relaunch of the EU Energy Unit, or for the European Recovery Plan to become a permanent tool, but also for fair cooperation with African democracies to build up green energy sources close by. So I would like to ask you to explain us a bit for a better understanding. What is the EU Energy Unit? What is the European Recovery Plan? How can they help us? And can a cooperation with Africa solve Europe's energy crisis? So this is 3 questions in one, and I know you can do it.
I know what I will forget the other ones while I'm
I will remind you
answering the first one. So as we have already heard from Michael Bloss, is that we have actually quite a sophisticated framework for energy policy in the European Union. And in 2015, we started with something which has been called the Energy Union strategy, so that energy is part of the union. And this energy union has several goals, and you have one you have mentioned already, is that very recently, because of the invasion in Ukraine, we need more energy independence and less dependence on Russian oil and gas deliveries. And I think we made quite some progress in that area. So that's something that worked very well, also because of the pressure of the international situation. The other big goal is to have a fully integrated European energy market. And that is really a big problem right now, that yes, we have connections between the different countries, but only between the bigger ones and only in certain areas. So we do not have an integrated market. And there is actually a Connecting Europe facility where a lot of money is spent for the construction of interconnections between the different areas of the European Union. A lot of work has already started, is going on. And so that problems in one area can be compensated by production in other areas, which is right now at this point of time a little bit difficult, especially if you look at small countries like Cyprus, islands and such things. So there's a lot of work needs to be done. And the European Green Deal is part of this energy package of policies to achieve CO2 neutrality. I think Michael Bloss has already told us about that. So there is a lot going on in research, in innovation, in decarbonizing the economy, in improving energy efficiency, and of course in having energy security and a certain solidarity to help each other. There are still some issues. Some people critique that we are still accepting too much nuclear power, which is something some of our member states still prefer. And yes, you can have arguments against that. And also using gas is still cited as a more environmentally friendly way of producing energy, where, well, it is maybe more friendly than coal, but it's still producing CO2. So there are some issues where discussions are going on. But all in all, the energy policy of the European Union has really started to have a good gear. But, and that's the last thing I want to say about that, it is not really taking the social component that I mentioned into consideration. That is something which is not in all these plans very much included. There are some proposals and there are some activities there, but all in all, it is more about these issues I have discussed. And that is something left in a way to the national governments to kind of have the affordability issue on their mind. The EU is not, in my perspective, not doing too much in regard to that. What were the other questions?
All
I
right,
already
we come
forgot.
back to the European Recovery Plan. So
Yes.
the UEFA said it should go on. There should be, a permanent tool made out of it so that we can react quicker to crises. And then the second part was the cooperation with Africa to solve Europe's energy crisis, to
Right.
make huge solar panels in the desert, for example.
Let me start with that last one, because that can be very fast. When we talk about cooperation with Africa, I don't know what some people seem to have in mind, that there's this Africa where you talk to. Yeah, we have the African Union, which is the equivalent of the European Union, but to be fair and honest, it's not a very strong organization. So you can talk to the African Union, but the African Union cannot really implement a lot of things at this point of time. Maybe in the future, but at this point of time, it's not really capable to do it. So, and we just saw in the news this week, we had a military takeover of the government in the Republic of Niger. So you see there is political instability in a number of African states. So if you talk with Africa, you have to really clearly define who are you talking to and who are you cooperating with. There are some countries, especially in the Sahara area, where you want to place your solar panels, you will have difficulties having an agreement and guarding these solar panels for any disturbances and problems. So it is easier said than done. The idea from a technical sense, the technical installation, that might be very fascinating and interesting, and it might be a good thing. But the political installation of such a project, that is a much bigger challenge, especially if you please keep in mind that European Union is not necessarily a place which is looked on very favorably by the African government. They have a lot of reservations in regard to many of our policies. And that's why Mr. Putin is currently inviting the African leaders to his own Russian-African conference. And that's why China is so heavily investing in Africa, because they know that there is apprehension in regard to the European Union, not only because of the colonial past, many other reasons. Therefore, at this point of time, I wouldn't put too many hopes on that. It is a very big implementation challenge which we are facing, and I think that it will not be easy. And all the plans in the past which have started thinking that way have stopped. So I'm not very optimistic. Now, the European Recovery Plan, this was the big stimulus package we had, the biggest actually we ever had in the European Union's history, to compensate for what happened in the pandemic. So to compensate, we have a total which was agreed upon of 750 billion euros when it was agreed upon. And it is a lot of money which is mobilized, and it is used for many other things now. We have also included a lot of money for all the fallout from the Ukraine invasion. So it's really a very big problem. It's aimed at helping rebuilding a post-COVID-19 Europe, and it has many different elements. The problem is that this huge amount of money which has been allocated will not come again in such a big amount. So we can, of course, continue this, but many of the things which are agreed upon are already in other European funds included. So they are pieces put together in one big package, but it's not that we're doing in all of the areas something really new. We did it in the past already, not with that much money. So I don't know if the fund as such, as an instrument, needs to be prolonged. The ideas behind it and the interventions, after evaluating how the money has been spent so far, that might be needed to be prolonged. I'm not always happy about having a new bureaucracy just because there's money which consumes some of this money. If we can do useful things in the structure we have, we don't need a special recovery fund, but we can strengthen European institutions in general.
Thank you for your precise assessment, and it gave Bernhard time to join us now. Welcome, Bernhard Zlanabitnig from the European Environmental Bureau. It's great to have you here. Hello.
Hello, thank you very much for the invitation. Thanks, Nana, for having me.
Wonderful. You get all the heavy questions now. So let's start with a huge one. Every generation is convinced that the world faces its end soon, and then in earlier times, everything was better. So this time in history, such an assessment actually seems somehow accurate. So now, your expert opinion, how would you assess the state of the world and the closeness of the end of its habitability for humans at this point in history?
That's indeed a big question. Thanks, Nana. Still, I try to answer it. Well, I think that in general, every generation thinks that this generation has its respective specific most difficulties ever before, and yeah, I mean, I also think this generation thinks the same, but I also think that every generation eventually overcame the difficulties and the challenges, and I'm deeply convinced. That's why I'm working for Europe's largest environmental organization. I'm deeply convinced that we can overcome the challenges we are facing, and of course, I'm only looking into the environmental nature perspective, and what I always try to do is starting from the eagle's from the bird's eye view, bird's eye perspective, and looking at the mega trends, global mega trends. I of course, I mean, the analysis has to be, yes, we are facing challenges. I mean, just looking at the climate change, we have heard Michael before and many others. We have just heard we had the hottest July ever in history. The incoming head of the UN Climate Science Agency, IPCC, just said that the world would exceed the Paris deal warming target of 1.3 degrees Celsius, 1.5 degrees Celsius. So they already start saying, well, guys, we are not able to stay below this climate target, and we can see it. I mean, just look at the news in Europe, the fires and wildfires in Canada, and so on and so forth. Heavy rain and so on. Yeah, so I mean, there is evidence, and it's accelerating. It's getting quite fast, and it has impact on individuals. I mean, losing houses from extreme weather, increasing cost for living, more violence also related to resource scarcity, health risks from pandemics or new diseases, but also for organizations, of course, the global food security, mass migration, and resource insecurity, supply chain disruptions. So all this is related to climate change, but it's not only climate change. I mean, it's also the growing pressure on ecosystems in general. It's environmental pollution. I mean, very often also in media, the focus is only on environment, but I think biodiversity is an as big challenge. I mean, unfortunately, there is no Greta Thunberg for biodiversity. And so this is from the environmental perspective, but then also the digital. You stop me, okay? When there is also digitalization, and so which is has a very big impact and transformative in a good in a bad way. I just returned from a conference where I was moderating a panel on gender and digital. Gender and digital transformation, and the impact, and in particular, women and girls are excluded from many of the advantages offered by digitalization, and in particular, again, in less or least developed countries, and they're more vulnerable, women and girls, to potential negative sides of connectivity. And the street is the road ahead is uphill. I mean, we are facing, so basically, the gender gap that exists in real life is mirrored in the digital world, and we are still 300 years away from gender equality. And so just to give you a number, and closing this gender gap is a human right issue, if you ask me. Yeah, and yeah,
and it's a good topic for another episode.
Yes, but it's also related to an environment,
yes,
of course, and to our work. So I just want to mention it because it was a couple of days ago, and yeah. So there are many other challenges we are facing, of course, and that's what I wanted to say. However, and now going to the positive side. I mean, there is. At the same conference, it was the HLPF, High Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development. I mean, we have this compass, we have this tool, we have these 17 goals for sustainable development, that if we implement it successfully, and at this conference there was a stock taking of we do so, then we can have this well-being for everyone. We can have this good life for everyone. And I've seen a lot of people working on it. I have seen a lot of young people there, a lot of youth delegates from all around the world, deeply convinced that it's possible, and that makes me believe that we have challenges, but we will overcome them.
That's beautiful. We need the positive attitude to target all that's actually endangering us. I have two questions from the chat before we continue with the regular questions. And one was posed before. It was posing the question whether the wind blades, the blades from the wind energy machines and the batteries, for all those e-motors, for example, whether they can be recycled. This was one question. And I have another one. This is coming very close to your path. I think there is in the chat written the question, is there a plan to preserve biodiversity? Of course there is. And what is it I would want to add to that? So two questions.
Right. Okay, let me start maybe with the biodiversity. I mean, there is as strong, as good development, let's say, on the biodiversity. I mean, there is also an international conference on biodiversity, and the problem is why it's not as strong in the media, I think, because climate is very clearly one target. It's like, let's stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius. But biodiversity is more complex. I mean, you have a lot of different layers, and there is not one number that you can look at. So that's why I think it's not as strong in the media. But I mean, there is this international UN conference. There are the targets, and there is also on EU level, of course, and we will get to this later. There is also the biodiversity strategy with very concrete and nature restoration law. I mean, we have heard it, which very clear targets on EU level, and this is a number. This means it says protected areas for at least 30% of land and sea. The other question on the blades of wind turbines, I'm not an expert on this, to be honest. What I know is that they are, let's say, if they are not used any longer in specific countries in Europe, then they are transferred to other countries. But I also think that it's possible to recycle them, but I don't really know about this, to be honest.
And with the batteries for the cars, do you know
what was the question about this? Sorry.
If what to do with the old batteries? I mean, it sounds like a huge pile of waste, or can they be recycled? Old e-car batteries. Yes. Dirk, you wanted to add something, I guess.
No, I don't. I'm just smiling.
Keep on smiling
as requested.
And you heard or you read what was written about you, which was so beautiful, and I hope it made you blush. Of course, I can't find it right now. It was a song on you, dear Dirk.
Don't sing. Please ask another question.
Don't sing. Okay, it's enough to do that in designation. Let's come back to Bernhard. Bernhard, the next huge question to you. We talk about the different causes for the crisis, like the climate change, and for solutions, of course, to the big questions. Like energy sources of the future, and we want to go from global warming to sustainable living, so to say. So that's the path to go. What, in your opinion, as an expert, are the most important steps we as humanity have to take now to reach that goal? Are there some, I don't know, top 5 steps that needs to be taken?
I don't know if it's top 5, but I have some ideas. I mean, what I already said. So we have a poly crisis. We are in a period of poly crisis. I mean, from the climate to biodiversity and many others, social and health and so on and so forth. And I think, as I said before, we have the Sustainable Development Goals that really can help us to overcome. However, it's very complex. I mean, it's like there is no simple solution, and I think that's why also people sometimes turn away. And just one example. I mean, using coal or other fossil fuels could improve energy access, which would have a positive impact on its goal 7 of the SDGs, but also has a negative impact on climate change or can destroy oceans. So will undermine goals 13 and 14, but also could have a negative impact on health from air pollution, which has an impact on goal 3. So you see, it's very complex, and this poly crisis in general, and the problems we're facing have to be tackled on different layers. And what I also think is that our systems we are in, bureaucracy, so the system we are in is not totally capable to tackle the challenges. So I think we are the systems are not able to not, yeah. So it's very difficult to overcome. Other example would be food production. It's no hunger, good health, good education, but could have a very negative impact on climate change mitigation and renewable energies as well, or water and land. So I think the Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals and polycrisis, I think this is one example. Another one would be multilateralism, international agreements. As I said before, not only on climate, but biodiversity, circular economy, systemic change would be something important, I think. So how we measure wealth, GDP beyond growth, I think this is also something we should look at. And what the EU, focusing now a little bit to the EU, I think the European Green Deal is something that really tries to tackle these different problems we are facing at the same time.
Let's come to the Green Deal and get a bit more specific. What is it all about, and what are concrete, reasonable, effective measures towards, for example, decarbonization or raising biodiversity, achieving sustainable food chains, or energy efficient products, or creating green jobs? Would you mention some of those measures? And in the end, I would also like to add the question, after you give us some examples, can Europe alone change the world's fate, or or are we pioneering, or are we alone on the whole thing? How do you see that in a global context?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. I mean, in a nutshell, to answer, I mean, the idea of the Green Deal, and it started with the now Commission, and Michael before already mentioned some interesting parts of it, is to Europe to become the first climate neutral continent by 2050. If I have to nail it down in one sentence, it's Europe, the first climate neutral continent by 2050, which means no net emissions of greenhouse gases by then. Economic growth should be decoupled from resource use. There are scientists who doubt it's possible. And also important to leave no one behind, to really take the losers, and there are losers in this change, in every change, but also in this legislation the EU is proposing, to take these people, organizations, companies with us, otherwise they will be resistant. And then to just very briefly give some examples what is in there, and we can go and look at it in more detail after. But it's so it's climate neutrality, it's zero pollution. It's also in agriculture, so the supply chain they call it from farm to fork strategy. So really looking at the whole production side of how we produce our food. I think it's also one of the weakest parts of the Green Deal. The biodiversity strategy with the nature restoration law. Then the circular economy, for me, it's one of the most important. For me, it's like the heart piece of the Green Deal. So changing from linear to circular economy. Zero pollution. It's very a hidden problem, but a lot of people dying from bad air quality. Also, noise is a big problem. I mean, it's ironically unheard, but it's a big issue in cities, of course, mostly. Then the polluter pays principle, that people who pollute, they should really pay, and not the general public. And then, as I said before, to leave no one behind. However, I mean, the Green Deal in general is a growth strategy, which my organization in general is a bit skeptic about it, that growth is the solution to problems. But I think this is just to give in a nutshell what the Green Deal is about. And the question, if we are alone, no, we are not alone. I mean, also the US started they call it IRA, Investment Reduction Act, and there is a lot of Inflation Reduction Act, and there is a lot of money now that will help companies to become more green. I think China as well is doing a lot. However, they're also building nuclear and coal plants. So we are definitely not alone, but I think we should go ahead and lead by example, and others will follow or must follow. For example, with the carbon border adjustment mechanism, that means only companies who produce fair and social and environmental friendly can import products to the EU.
Very interesting. I would like to ask you now the question a bit similar to what I asked Michael, but also different. Same, but different. What is the role of civil society in changing the world's fate? But in your case, I would like to ask how much every single one of us can do. For example, can we really change the world when we ride a bike or choose not to fly or eat less meat or buy consciously, sustainably grown food and clothes with a proven green background, or by repairing old things and showering cold or turning off our standby buttons? Is that really making a difference?
Yes.
Okay.
No, definitely. And I think the more, I mean, everyone thinks is a very little thing, but little things in the end are a big thing. I mean, I think there is really I can see a change of mind in a lot of people, how they live, how they consume, not because they must, because they're really convinced that it's a good way forward. On the other hand, coming back from the US, from this conference, I also saw the opposite, that well, some people deeply believe in consumption. I really think that there is a change going on, no matter if it's food, if it's traveling, if it's housing. I mean, of course, I think you need to, with campaigns, whatever, to change people's minds. You also need incentives. You need to give money to put solar panels on houses, but also you need to penalize people if they do not follow, like if they're really polluting, let's say, or yeah. So I think it should be a combination. Civil society, I mean, we really had, I think we really make a difference in Brussels. I mean, we doubled our staff in the last couple of years because we have so many things to do, because the Green Deal really gave us a lot of work. We really hope, I mean, Michael mentioned it also, the Commission and the Parliament, its mandate ends next June. And there is the fear that the next Commission, the next Parliament is less progressive as it's now. But I mean, there are a lot of things we have to look at. But I really believe, honestly and deeply, that we can all together have an impact. I could go on forever. I mean, it's about environmental justice. It's about environmental peace building. We are also looking at Ukraine, for example, already now in the rebuilding. We are also looking at Western Balkan. We have now also organizations beyond, I mean, even in Africa and Turkey and Ukraine, as I mentioned. So a lot of movements, sometimes not as visible as they should be, and all the different actors, no matter if it's Fridays or climate activists or lobbyists, or we call it advocacy. I mean, I think all together really can have an impact, and of course, everyone, every person, and every European, and of course, everyone in the world, by changing behavior, can have an impact.
That's good to hear. Thank you so much for now. I think we will meet again and have a deeper conversation. And I think, Bernhard, do you still have a question for Dirk? You asked me in our talks up front if it was possible to ask him something. Would you still like to do that?
Could you help me a little bit on the question?
Oh, it was about shrinking space. It was about the role of civil society into shrinking space.
Shrinking. Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a problem. Yes, we talked about it, and so the shrinking space for civil society is something we are realizing, and it's happening not only in member states that have not as democratic government as others, let's say. But yeah, I mean, is this something also other observers from other bubbles can observe, can see, and what can be done?
Yeah, well, maybe we have to explain to the audience what we are talking about when we say shrinking space, because that's a special term which is used in the CSO NGO community very much, but outside they don't know what is happening. So when we talk about shrinking space, we talk about the fact that governments, by one way or the other, either by direct intervention or by indirect measures like taxation, registration, and so on, start to limit the area of activities of civil society organizations, NGOs, and therefore try to control them sometimes try to silence them if they're very critical, but to make sure that they have a hand on the political processes and the discussion, and sometimes punish them when they really don't like them, like it happens in some of the EU member states, which are at this point of time a little bit problematic in regard to the democratic situation. I think we have to differentiate a little bit what we talk about when we talk about civil society, because when you have countries like, for example, Germany, where I live and I'm a director of an NGO, many civil society organizations and NGOs do the work of the government. They receive public funding and execute tasks the government doesn't want to do or is not capable of doing, or where they say they can do it better. So there is, in one area of the civil society, a quite symbiotic relationship between government and their own activities. And there, the shrinking space is only defined primarily by cutting of funding, when programs are cut down, like it's happening right now in Germany because of our budgetary problems. There we have a kind of a mistrust developing slowly. And we have a kind of an impatience of political decision makers to listen to NGOs and CSOs. And on the other hand, then CSOs sometimes are a little bit afraid that if they open their mouth too wide, they will be not anymore beneficiaries of public funding. So I think it's not the same in every EU member state. We have some states, like, for example, Hungary or Poland, where the situation is much more serious. But there is sometimes as a reaction to things like Fridays for Future and Last Generation and all these things, like something like an anti-reaction against civil society. And I think that is very dangerous. I think we shouldn't do that. I think we should be able to endure criticism, should be able to have an open discussion. We don't have to accept everything all the time. We don't have to say yes to everything, but let's have a discussion and exchange the arguments. And by using these kind of methods, like making it difficult to get a charity status or making it very bureaucratic to register a CSO and things like that, that is not helping anyone. And CSOs are very important for the functioning of a democratic society. And therefore, I can only say I see this development with some reservation and some fear. As a German working in Germany, here it's not that difficult, actually. So there's still a quite good connection between the government and the civil society in some areas, not in all areas. But I fear for the development of the European Union if such tendencies in other countries will continue in the pace they are actually developing right now.
Thank you so much, because this is also leading wonderfully to our next episode coming a Monday this time already. So we are already here on 31st of July and tackling the anti-democratic developments in Europe, the role of the civil society, and also how we all can strengthen democracy. Bernhard, would you like to add something?
No, this was wonderfully explained, and it's really crucial and really important. And the last, what I wanted to say is that next year's election, in many countries, including Germany and Austria, you can vote from 16 euro and just do it.
Perfect. I think we completely say yes to that. Thank you so much, Bernhard, for being here. There's some more questions in the chat. I will try to post them to Dirk. We will be a little longer than normally, let's say another 5 to 10 minutes maximum. So for those of you who would like to know how long we go today, it will be a bit longer. Thank you, Bernhard. All the best to you and all your efforts.
Very much. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks for me. Bye-bye.
Dirk, I have 2 questions here. Will there be European taxes? I think you have to look into your crystal ball to answer that. For people, I guess that's
Yeah, I know,
what is
well,
meant,
whatever.
not for nations.
No, well, if it's for people or it is for corporations, I mean, it doesn't matter. At this point of time, the EU budget is not directly financed from the citizens of the European Union, but from contributions directly transferred from the member states. And this will not change in the foreseeable future, because one of the basic consequences of having direct European taxes is that the nation states will lose a portion of the power, because the power comes through the budget, through the money. where can you spend money and how can you spend it, where you get it. If the European Union is suddenly, or the European Parliament, indeed fully directly responsible to the citizens, to the people who elect them, and not through the national governments, then this will change the whole structure of how we do politics in the European Union. And that is something many national governments are very afraid of at this point of time. They don't want that.
Is something
So
we
therefore,
will also talk about in
we will talk about that on Monday. Yeah. Okay.
4th of on the 4th of
Okay.
August, actually, democracy of the
Whatever.
future and Europe of the
Very
future.
good.
Actually, how can we develop that? We
good.
have to say more, and that we can co-create our European living space. Normally, at this point, we will always talk about the role of the people and civil society. But we did that already. So my very last question, and I'm really looking forward to your answer because I know it's one of your most favorite topics in life. It goes out to just another space where humans have littered much too much. About 7 tons of space garbage litters the space around Earth. Dirk, you love space. What can you tell us about European actions concerning the Earth's ultimate environment, space?
Well,
what are we trying to do there?
I have good news and bad news for you. The good news is that since 2022, we have European space traffic management. So we have satellites and we have space services which track debris and satellites and help providing collision avoidance services to active European spacecraft. So this is in awareness of the fact that in fact our orbit is polluted and this is an increasing danger for new rockets starting, so to avoid collision. Now the bad news is that the problem in itself, all this garbage circling the Earth, is not solved and will not be solved in the foreseeable future. And I also think that this is not for the European Union alone. You asked yourself in another topic the question, are we alone? Can we do it alone? Can we solve it alone? And space is another issue where all spacefaring nations, the United States, Russia, China, India, and everyone else who is already, Japan, who is going to space, they have to work together to solve this problem, because if this continues like this, there will be the time when we need a big cleanup. Because not all of this debris is falling down to Earth, not everything is consumed by fire in the atmosphere. And we have to do something about it sooner or later. And it will not be something the European Union can do alone, I fear.
Thank you for that famous last words for today's episode. I thank everyone who stayed with us, who joined us in the look into the abyss. I hope you came out strengthened after our talk, because it's only the combination of rationality and compassion and creativity and simple action that can help us now. Fighting, fleeing, freezing, aggression, helplessness, sadness, those all can't help us. So right in the middle of chaos, it teaches us that we fight those first impulses and get accustomed with facts, seeing new possibilities, walking new ways. This is what we are doing all together, hopefully. Next time, upcoming Monday, I mentioned it already, we will tackle another hot topic that poses a major threat to our free society. This is democracy, anti-democratic developments in the EU, and what we as people can do to secure our freedom. And well, I thank you again for being here with us. Thank you, Dirk. And I didn't sing the praise to you, but I hope you
thank you.
Have a wonderful evening, everybody, and goodbye for now. More Europe now. More Europe now. Hosted by Nana Walzer with resident expert Dirk van den Boom and special guests